We're doing the theme song, and we're going to stick with this. Welcome, no viewers, but it is recording. So, my name is Roy. Welcome to Escaping Dystopia, your guide for avoiding the American apocalypse. See? And then we go. What up, G Money? Ah, there we go. Now we're getting some folks showing up. Oh, wow. Do you like the theme song? It's just like, it's like a... Escaping Dystopia. Alright, so let me see. Let me fix this real quick. Let me get the outline up here. There's a bunch of stuff going on this week. I don't know if you noticed. Boom! Crazy man. What's up, G? Yeah, you need to come visit Colorado if you don't live here. You still live in Texas, don't you? Apologies. Nah, it's all good, man. Gotta have peeps all over. Alright, I'm gonna throw up this outline. Tonight's episode is entitled WTF. You knew this was coming. So, yeah, this week has been a little bit slightly more than crazy. I don't know how to say it other than that. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that happened and see what we can do from there. Wow, right? It's been difficult just to kind of conceive of the week that's gone on. So I'm going to, talk about it a couple different ways. One of the things that I would like to see, and this is, my whole boring blah, blah, blah policy discussion thing, is just the notion, I heard they talked about this a little bit on Science Friday on NPR, which still exists for the moment, about the notion of media literacy classes being something, and even for this was more, they were talking about the concept of science literacy and talking about it that way, but I think even on a bigger scale, because this concept of fake news and understanding information about the world, I haven't done I need to do a couple slower kind of episodes about just particular concepts. One of these that's really important here is how we build up a notion about the outside world that we don't physically interact with, right, through our ears and eyes and our actual senses. We build this world through the media that we interact with, not, the media that everybody hates, like those big international media companies, the media, but media being information that comes through various sources about the outside world that we don't directly interact with. These were all, and again, this is a whole long discussion. I got tons of stuff to talk about tonight, but I would love to see that happen on a more local basis. Oh man, Scott, for sure. We went out for the thing. I'm going to talk about some of the protests going on. The stuff. I mean, this actually worked, and I'm going to talk about this later. And I do think it's important for people to get out, but you got to stay patient and relax. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But no question about the resistance. The resistance is strong. It's just these to not turn into too much of a cliche. But we'll get to that. So this notion of fake news, the problem that we have right now, and if you were to try and teach media classes now and bring this on, you have a situation, and this is real, where the President of the United States this morning tweeted that the New York Times is quote-unquote fake news. The New York Times is not fake news. The New York Times is one of the bedrock journalistic places. They have a long history of doing this. I'm not going to go into all this. Fake news is stuff where you just make up bullshit. Like, that time that... I mean, the thing that's so funny about Trump is you can't even actually make up fake news. People don't believe it. Like, I could be like, oh, that time that... Remember when he played, like, he called up the New York... Like, all the New York media, like he was his own publicist and tried to get them to write about how all these models wanted to bang him. And, I mean, like, that's the kind of stuff that, like, or how he got a bunch of medical deferments for Vietnam and actually joked about how avoiding STDs in New York was his own personal Vietnam. I mean, like, those are actually, I think those are both true stories, to be honest. But, so anyway... you can't do like the fake news thing against someone who has no shame. Yeah, I agree. Fake news probably is a bad term, and it's so easy to just abuse and label to something like that. It should be. I mean, it's just fiction, like fictional storytelling. I don't know. Fake news, I do think is too catch-all of a term. That's a good point, Kevin. And actually, something I hadn't really thought of particularly. So, anybody's got a better term to start talking about this? And this is like, and there was, I posted a meme about this a little while back, but there's like the. People who grew up with Weekly World News and stuff like that, and the National Enquirer, by the way, who are huge Trump supporters. He claims fake news. Yeah, he's actually got a big thing with the New York Times and all that, and that's how he thinks like a respectable person works and all that. He's got all sorts of psychological issues with being New York and the New York Times. This is the only place that he believes. And he's calling them fake news. This is part of Bannon's media strategy. We'll talk about this a little bit later. This is where things get a little weird. Again, my show here is called Escaping Dystopia, a guide to avoiding the American apocalypse. There's a lot of syllables there, folks, so there's some pretty heady stuff that we're going to talk about. Bannon's like ethno-nationalism stuff, this is exactly what these executive orders were. And one of the things that they have to do in order to rework the world order is destroy the news and make Trump the only source of information for stuff about what's going on in the outside world, where you can't trust anything but him. And that's the goal, eventually. That's why they're attacking the media like they are, because that's what they have to set up and they want to do. This is the point behind the global gag rule. The global gag rule is in fact a rule that gags people globally from speaking out. So this is actually the gag rule specifically this is what's called, I believe, the New Mexico policy, where we can no longer as a nation tell anyone that abortion exists. And if they find out that anybody who's getting any money tells someone that abortion exists, they can jank off their funding. Oh, speaking of this is really, really, really strange. I saw this today. Turns out that Trump filed for re-election a few hours after the inauguration. This means that he's currently a candidate in certain, for 2020, which means certain groups cannot criticize his candidacy. They have to specifically reference Trump the president, not Trump the candidate. We'll see. I saw this a little bit. I didn't get to read much about it. It's kind of a weird thing, but this is part of the working the laws to control and take advantage. This is what he's done his whole career. This is what he works. Roy Cohn, if you want to read up on an absolute asshole bastard who really brought shame to the name Roy. Sucks. Angels in America, if you ever want to watch something that HBO did about the AIDS crisis. And you can, Cohn was one of Trump's, there's a Freudian slip there. Cohn was one of Reagan's assholes. When the AIDS crisis came and started, and Cohn was actually gay. He's kind of like one of those Milo, like, really hating gay people, gays. But Angels in America, Roy Cohn, that was a big thing for Trump. If you want to read a little bit more about this guy, he's just a horrible person. But so they're trying to shut down all sources of information that are not from directly that group. So this is why you had all that gag rule, and this is why you had the national park people coming out too. They want to, especially with the global warming. 2016, as noted by NASA when they were still able to tell us, all the measurements that they have showed it to be the hottest year in human civilization, as we've seen a lot of models predict. We also had the lowest ice coverage over the ocean. This is what reflects a lot of energy back into the sun. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. It's going to get hotter soon next year. We'll find out. Now, the question of whether or not this information can come out is now a question, because these guys are going directly against... they are federal employees, all these national and park people. Now, speaking of that fake thing, one of the big things that happened this week, again, was the president claiming that in this election that put him into office, millions of people, millions, voted illegally. They study that they ended up citing. This is actually funny. This is funny. This is legit funny because the guy's a moron. The interview with ABC, he talks about why he thinks that they are millions of fake voters. And he references something that he calls, multiple times, he calls it Pew Report. And that's what he calls it. That's where this piece, if it came, I don't do his voice, I just talk like a dummy. It came from Pew Report. Pew Report says, well, if you just read Pew Report, and that's what he's referencing is this report from the Pew Research Council, Pew Reports, right? But he just calls it Pew Report. Well, if you read Pew Report will show you. And what he's referencing is this notion of people being registered in multiple states. And there's like a certain number, and that's what it's then extrapolated into this, and this guy makes up all this BS and then claims that there's millions of people who could possibly vote fraudulently. Trump then takes this and turns it into every single one of these who could possibly vote fraudulently did and voted for his opponent. This is all the mental gymnastics needed to claim that he really won the popular vote to his own mind. Again, he's a malignant narcissist. He can't accept the concept. He can never be, in his own mind, good enough. And so this is why this stuff is just, he's not going to stop. He's not going to relax. He's not going to chill out. But bringing up this fake vote is a part of that. Now, the thing that's so bad about this also is if you look at the people who are registered in multiple states, there's two of them that I saw mentioned specifically, Sean Spicer and Jared Kushner. Both also are people who are registered to vote in two different places. Study came up by comparing databases of different things. But the point here is that there is not millions of fake votes that happen in this country every year. There were a few, you can usually count them on one hand. They actually caught this one Trump voter trying to vote twice. So we know already that at least one of them was one of his people. So they couldn't have all been for Hillary. This is kind of bad, and this actually got this is one of those things that's why I write these things down and talk about them in the show, because they get a little overshadowed later in the week. But this was covered by this one guy who says, "It is most inappropriate thing for the president to say without proof," Graham told CNN in an interview on Cable 2. "We're talking about a man who won the election and seems to be obsessed with the idea that he could not have possibly lost the popular vote without cheating and fraud. So I would urge the president to knock this off. People are going to start doubting you as a person if you keep making accusations against our electoral system without justification." As Lindsey Graham. He's from South Carolina. Anyway, so you can't keep claiming that fraudulent votes put you in the position that you have. This undermines your entire legitimacy. And this is one of the things that he actually has this great fear of. This came from an article I read about some of his biographers, that he's a fraud. He kind of knows he's a fraud. So that's his great fear, is that he's not. So he's going to do all this stuff to try and justify. Speaking of which, as we move on to the next subject, I had noted this story because I wanted to talk about it earlier in this week, and I'll read you what I had noted to speak about. It says, U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to sign several executive orders on Wednesday restricting immigration from Syria and 6 other Middle Eastern or African countries, according to several congressional aides and immigration experts briefed on the matter. In addition to Syria, Trump's orders are expected to temporarily restrict access to the United States for most refugees. Another order will block visas from being issued to Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, said the aides and experts, who asked not to be identified. We'll speak on the whole leaking like a sieve thing here in a little bit later, but there have been, I hope you've seen the news today, there's been massive protests, and last night around the country at various airports. This is a fundamental aspect of being an American, is that we are a refuge for people on this fucking planet. Alright, so I'm not going to go too hard on this, because this is one of those things where I just had to watch this happen. And then they came out and claimed, "Oh, we didn't do that. We didn't do that. We didn't ban those people. I didn't campaign on banning Muslims. I didn't ask somebody how to do it. I didn't come up with this. Bullshit, motherfucker." And this thing now where they came out and actually put out a thing where they're trying to blame Obama and claiming that Obama did that and this, that, and the other. And just, it's the only thing, I mean, that really just the response, of course, is a GFY. And just kind of like, but anyway, there's global confusion, mass protest. We got a judge to come out and stay this, too. And this is the thing that's even stranger, right? Because they don't come out and say, my congressman, by the way, who apparently is some sort of massive coward, is this guy named Mike Kaufman. He waited until after the stay to come out and say that he didn't agree with this. It's just so wrong. And then the administration comes out and says, well, that's not what we meant at all. And it's, you campaigned on this. You wanted to do it. You did it. And everybody's going, what the fuck is wrong with you? Anyway, and so they actually had another clarification today because they had to, that apparently green card holders who are legal permanent residents can now come home. Which they hadn't clarified. It took 2 days. Yeah, I saw it. Nobody knows what the fuck's going on. And then actually Rights Priebus comes out and is like, oh no, it was perfectly, this was very, very smooth, very transition. Everybody needed to know who needed to know. I think Spicer, it's, yeah, and well, that's the confusion. Again, this goes back to larger theme, larger point. They want to set up a situation where you have to go to them for information, where everybody else is confused because they're claiming it wasn't a ban. Oh, Obama did this. We didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, we have a Statue of Liberty. This is one of our things. So these are our core values. I'm going to talk a little bit more some other times about how to talk to people about this. One of the things that's very important to reference and go to is your core values as an American when you discuss this, because this is what we're fighting over. Everybody wants to claim to be standing for this, but yeah, when you have a different stance, you have to go at it. For real. This is real. This happened today. I do think the mass protests are important, and I do think the pushback helps. I mean, this is how you get the judge to stay things. This is how you get things to move back. But one thing that I think everybody needs to have as we go forward and to avoid the worst of this is to have a lot of patience, right? This is a weekend, right? The judges are trying to stop this legally. This is where the idea of our institutions can hold the line, so to speak, but that takes time, right? His polling is horrible, and so we'll see how long that works. This actually goes into a little bit of my next bit about how to kind of reach out and talk to. I read another one of the think pieces, two more, this week on how liberals just gotta be nice to us. And then, you know, which one? Tiny hands? I don't think you can say massive dong about tiny hands. It just don't work quite like that. But so there was actually a good, I don't remember who did it. It was I needed to read it again, but it was talking a little bit about the different approach from the conservative mindset and the liberal mindset to communicating political ideas, and the more, technocratic kind of liberal, just, here's the facts, present the facts, and then people will all come to the same conclusion, whereas the conservative side is a little bit more marketing-based, where you try and appeal to certain emotions and use and manipulate all that to get people to do what you want. The thing that I it's actually good, but I'll share it later if you guys really want to have more stuff. Hey, peace out, Scott. Thanks for dropping by, man. I always appreciate anybody who have a few minutes. Look, and anybody who does watch, I'm very protective of my own personal time, so I don't expect everyone to watch every stuff and hang out and watch me whatever. I mean, this is something I do think that, 15, 20, 30 minutes a week for most people to pay attention is enough, but you do need to go know what's going on. But anyway, these think pieces about how to communicate and reach out. I don't know if you watch me on the whole Denver 7 is just a blast, by the way. But there are ways to do this, and I think appealing to our values, our core values as Americans, is very important. The war on facts and realities that we're dealing with, I think, is probably one of the scariest things, because that is the idea that, as people communicate and generally have the same information, they will make largely the same decisions. But now you're seeing this, tiny hands, tiny cock is what they say. It's like between, there's a number of things you can measure. It's, I'm not going to talk about dicks. Much more, I guess, right? See, that's kind of the fun thing about my informal not having to do or worry about anything, because I can just say what I want. It's more like a comedy show than it is a political thing. But anyway, talking to people who think you're a libtard, I'm not exactly sure how to. Well, it's the disagreement on facts and reality is a more fundamental thing than I think we need to. I don't know. I need to work on this a little bit. This piece was supposed to just come together in my head. See, this is what happens sometimes. But interacting with these folks and seeing how there's actually, there was a good piece, and this goes back to another thing I heard about inoculating against the propaganda and the gaslighting, and how to use kind of pre-information and kind of pre-exposure to a BS line of reasoning will allow one to see through that. And they did some experiments with global warming and stuff like that. I think the NPR stuff and the site on this, and again, I'll have to link to this, but I think the left is far behind. Like the alt-right is built on this concept of inoculating people against counter-argument. So coming back to it, I think you have to go to very, very core fundamental values and concepts in order to get people to really approach this stuff rationally. And if that sounds a little abstract to you, it should, because trying to communicate to people who live in a different reality, and that reality is shaped by their media, and they have an entirely different media source and set, to find a common core ground to build from and then to have a conversation there is always, I think, quite interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about the ban and the Muslim ban, which is they're claiming is not a Muslim ban, and what it could do and will do, and what it could lead to, and the logic behind what they can do with it now. There was, on The Simpsons a long time ago, back when they were parodying some of our crazy responses to 9/11, an episode called Much Ado About Nothing. And in it, Mr. Ned Flanders spots a bear on the street, a terrorist, if you will, which prompts a whole town to crusade against bears and create a bear patrol. And Homer's out there looking around one day, and this is I'm going to read you the scene, and he's looking around, he's like, not a bear in sight, the bear patrol must be working like a charm. And Lisa says, that's specious reasoning, Dad. So wonderful for the vocabulary, the Simpsons, specious. Such a fun word. He says, thank you. By your logic, she says, I could claim that this rock keeps tigers away, and she pulls a rock out of her pocket. And he says, well, how does it work? And she says, it doesn't work. And then he says, uh-huh. And she says, it's just a stupid rock. And he says, uh-huh. Well, but then she says, but I don't see any tigers around. Do you? And then he thinks about this for a second, and not being a smart man, then decides, Lisa, I want to buy your anti-tiger rock. So what this Muslim ban does, right, either way, right, If there are no attacks, then he goes in the next, 6 months or whatever time frame, then they can say, well, look, it worked. We've got to keep it. This is working. Let's make it stronger. It's obviously working right. If there are attacks, well, obviously we didn't do enough. We have to do more. We've got to keep it. This thing is not meant to prevent anything. This is meant to provoke. This is the first sign, and you'll see many more, and I'm going to talk about this a lot. Again, escaping dystopia, avoiding American apocalypse. This is Bannon's ethno-nationalism and cultural purity coming to the fore. It's the white Christian nation that is who we are. They're not going to ever explicitly say this, and I actually had this conversation because they don't feel that they have to. They kind of just talk about it, and then everybody just needs to understand that that's what they mean by, the economic nationalism is what Bannon will admit to. But when they get to it later and you'll be like, oh, the cultural national, well, what do you mean by cultural? Oh, well, like Rachel, a racist culture. Oh, so you're talking about white nationalism, aren't you? Yes, they are. And so it's a white Christian thing. So that is, well, we're not racist. What race is Muslim? Huh? I'm not racist. What race is Muslim? Huh? So, see? And this is what I said, the alt-right inoculates against that. So when you're like, oh, this is such a bigoted, it's just so bigoted and racist. This policy is obviously directed against, what race is Muslim, huh? It's not racist. You're racist for bringing it up. So, if you've ever seen that argument, maybe once, twice, 1,000 times, from the alt-right, that's who that is, by the way. Whitewashing. You know it! And by the way, Trump is not going to move away from Bannon. They're going to go all the way to the end. I mean, I think Bannon's a little bit of the blackmailing type, so he's probably got a bunch of stuff on tape that he's recorded. He's promised Trump the world, that he's going to be like the world ruler, and he's delivered the U.S. So the chance that Trump will turn on Bannon is, I think, extremely small. I see them being all the way down to like them being down, in the bunker, like, you gonna do it? You gonna do it? All right. On 3, 1, 2, and Bannon shoots him. Because that's the kind of guy that Bannon is. But yeah, this was the ethno-nationalism first round of the shot. The whole point of this is to try and provoke and realign the world. For real. There's a lot of people who are excited about this, not for just reasons that he's just doing things, and they don't really kind of have a concept of what that's going to lead to. Speaking of which, the Justice Democrats. They will provide justice and primary everyone, whoever has taken the money. No worries. The Flash. It's my wonderful, beautiful, amazing wife. Who just wanders by sometimes.
Max hit her head really hard.
Oh no! Yep, real world. See, that's how you know it's real. How that's not fake news. And now, of course, Trump will probably have like his kids running the room if he thinks that'll work. But yeah, so this whole I ran into this last week, this Justice Democrat stuff. This is run by the Young Turks. I don't know if you've ever guys seen this. This is like the far left. This is essentially like the Bernie bro movement coalescing. And I had this conversation with this guy who I was friended and defriended within the week, very quickly, just because of this notion. And we're going to actually talk about with the TPP, as they were all very anti-trade deal. It turns out it's like just completely anti-trade deal. So this is my issue with this, and I shared this a little bit, and this is why I'm not like, one of those self-identified super liberal persons. When people actually ask if they have to, I call myself a pragmatic realist, if you need a label. But I'm not, and this is where the far left, I just kind of lose it, because there's not I tried to get an example of any trade deal in the history of the U.S. that could be acceptable, and there's nothing. that would work, and they think that, just like, okay, let me give you another example, right? And this is why I think some of the far left is a little bit like, just, I can't get into it. Like the fight for 15, right? Like I actually, in cities and places that can support $15 an hour minimum wage, perfectly all right. When you say that every candidate that you're going to support or you're going to primary them has to support a $15 an hour national minimum wage, or you're going to primary them and they're not real progressives and they're not actually liberals, and they're in Mississippi, the median income is $31,000 a year. $15 an hour equates roughly, if you work, full time, right? It's $30,000 a year. So the median right now is 31. The minimum would then become 30. And I don't know if you're familiar with math, but median is when you line up everybody, and the one in the middle, right, that's the median income. And this guy right here is making $31,000. Now, everybody over here, you take them all and you line them up all right here, it crashes. And so that's the kind of thing with that justice stuff, and that I don't think is rational, to the point of, like, come on, guys. And this is why I think one of the reasons why Hillary was a better candidate, because she understood this and was able to communicate it, I thought, pretty well. Another example of this, one of the people that these the far left ends are going after, and that, God love them, they're great, they're all good, but going after Cory Booker, right, because of this one vote on one amendment where he went against St. Bernie for the moment. He's out at the airport last night trying to get some information about who's detained, why. He's trying to pass over copies of this judge's order. He's, writing these questions, working. He's a senator for this state, so he's out there fighting for what I would call justice. And this is one of those people who is now, people are taking money from the same crowd from Bernie to try and primary him and get him out of office. And this is somebody who's out there right now fighting for this stuff in a way that I think is quite legitimate. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up. This goes back, and the left actually hurt, I think, Hillary quite a bit. And I'm going to not relitigate all of this, but when you go back to the primary season we had last year, it ended up being, despite the fact that Hillary had clearly won the nomination and wrapped it up, it was actually Trump that completed and was able to focus on her before the other way around, because Bernie held it on till the convention. And then you saw the craziness at the convention. And that kind of stuff really needs to stop from the opposition party. I don't know that it's going to, and this is one of the things that I find somewhat frustrating as well. And that this week's conversations and whatnot, I think, is a good encapsulation of the issues surrounding that in dealing with those kind of things. So I'm not sure where the left's going to coalesce, if it will. So we shall see. We shall see. We'll keep moving forward on that, and that'll be an ongoing conversation. That's why I think that's a conversation that needs to happen now, and continue to keep going. Again, while I'm talking, to have conversations about this kind of stuff, and go forward. So, I'm going to do one more thing on a little bit. Do it okay on time. This is a big week on this stuff, and I want to be clear for those who join in a little bit later. Yeah, the whole craziness. But there was another thing that happened too, because one of the other executive orders was pulling us out of the TPP, which was the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership we were essentially putting up to act as something of a counterweight to growing and expanding Chinese influence in the Pacific. They, let me read you this real quick, because after Trump was like, I don't believe in one China, and then Rex Tillerson was like, well, yeah, of course we go to war in the South China Sea. Yeah, we're not going to let them take it. China has now taken the stance that the South China Sea is China. The U.S. has no business over there. There's other people they have disputes with. So reading from one of the articles today, it says, further suggestions that China is preparing for conflict emerged this week. With unconfirmed reports, the military has moved long-range missiles closer to the northeast border in the Heilongjiang province, within firing range of the U.S. Chinese social media has carried pictures claiming to show the Dongfeng 41 advanced intercontinental ballistic missiles near the Russian border. They did that. They also built the stuff up on those islands down in the South China Sea. So we'll find out what the response is going to be from Trump, if there is one on this, because the White House is leaking like a sieve. And this is another big or just bad thing, right? The fact that I know that the way that these tweets come out in the morning is that Trump gets up and he turns on cable news and he just sits there and watches it and then gets pissed off at something. And that's what happens. They've tracked a number of these tweets that he'll send out with the same information that's coming from Twat, from Fox, or from O'Reilly to him, back to them, in this feedback loop of crazy, where that's where he gets all his information from, is cable news. This is the guy who's running our country gets his information from cable news. A horrible place of bad information. So it's leaking because nobody has any respect for him, so they want to talk to the press. So we've seen stuff that doesn't normally come out for years until somebody who was loyal and then, got screwed over then goes to the press. Now it's just... Well, and the thing about Fox, too, that's crazy is he's actually gone out and he's tweeting continuously saying they're the only ones you can trust. Everyone else is lying. They're the fake. They're the real news. Everyone else is fake. And he's all but doing promos for him at this point. So that is, and there was another thing that came out, too. Roughly, it was something like 40% of Trump voters, that's the only place they get their information from and the only place they trust. This is just... that's the way it's going to be. It's the alternate reality that we're living in now until they start to die off, I guess. One thing to watch for as we start to wrap up a little bit, I think we've got to make sure everybody's alive upstairs and all that. Military parades. Just to keep an eye on. Oh, this is something else, and I'm going to say this as a for those of you who are interested in changing this and stopping it and helping us escape this dystopia, we need to convince other people that stuff's wrong. Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Mario. Thanks for dropping dude. Have a good night. One of the things we have to do is engage other people and convince them that things need to change. And that the change that we're seeing now is not at all what anybody wants. Sorry, I lost that a little bit. But, so a way a lot of people deal with media and learn about what's going on this week, they don't follow this news. There's 10, 15, 20 stories this week that happen that were important and strange. Thank you, always. I'm trying to do what I can, man. People who don't follow news, who don't care about it, who have become cynical about the state of the world, don't follow all this. They see somebody trying to do something to fix things, and that somebody that they see trying to do this is our current president. So just beware of that and take patience to this. Yes, and we do. We have to be very, very patient and keep going on this and don't give up. The only way, and this is the only way to lose, is to just give up. Keep fighting. You either win or you die a glorious death on the battlefield. So, I mean, that's it. So, can you tell I'm watching Spartacus again? Because that's good stuff. Anyway, there's some good speeches in there. Hopefully, maybe I'll give you guys one. I'm actually kind of fun at those. I love doing that kind of stuff. But there's this question of political effort. And you see these protests, and they're going to keep going on. And how many protests does it take to get to the center of a political change? And one, two, no. So there's not a direct calculation of going from you go out this many times, you get this many phone calls, you do this many things. No, the only time that works is on election day, when you get this many votes and you win. The politics outside of that continues and is important, and what sets up that day and those days, at least in our democracy. Fighting now to make sure that people can go vote, that voters aren't suppressed, that the people like the ACLU are funded well to keep these fights, that the New York Times has an increasing subscriber base, so Trump's lies about them going under are lies. These things are more important, and this is the fight. So I'm going to just about let you go on this, folks. I think I'm pushing 45 minutes, which I guess I could keep going, but I got to stop. Look at what we had to do for civil rights in the first place. Fight, election, win, lose, fight, keep going, fight, win. Now still keep fighting. So there's not a way to actually win this, but you just have to keep going and finding better ways and more effective ways to do this. And so the notion of political effort and how to stop this and how to move forward is there are many, many ways to engage and do it. But one of the important ones is to get to people who do not necessarily engage with the political process, who do not engage with the news media, and finding a story, one, maybe a week, to share with them about how fucked up this shit is. So watch for the military parades. Because if that happens, because he wanted that. He wants tanks and missiles rolling down the street just to lift the national spirit. Again, this is nationalism. Look it up if you're unfamiliar with what it does and how it is. If you see those, or we get to that point, it's for reals time to just really start getting at it, because that's not what we want to see. Anyway, with that, with the threat of Chinese nuclear attack and military parades here in the U.S., like I said, folks, escaping. You got to escape the dystopia. Don't let it happen. It's so much easier to avoid on the front end than it is to get out on the back end. Really. So much easier. It's like that Stitch in Time, Save 9. Yeah. I don't know, it would be triggered, but, you know. Triggered in military is not, I don't know, the connotations start to get a little bit snowflakey. Flaky. Good times. Hey! Oh, no, I'm going to save that. Now, there's a couple. It's been going on a long time, and like I said, got the real world to go deal with. So everyone, pay attention this week. It'll be interesting, I'm sure. We're in the middle of a huge crisis. There are American, not citizens, but people who live here, literally, legally live here, who are being denied entry into this country right now, based on lies and fear. And we got to be better. We got to be brave. We got to be smart. We got to be good. Good country. Good people. Fighting for what's right. Bubblegum team. Crazy week, man. All right, I'm going to see y'all next week. Maybe even before that. Thanks, everybody who tuned in tonight. Peace out, y'all. It's gonna be okay. Long term, sun's gonna stay. It's gonna be alright. Have a good night, y'all. You have a good night too, Vicky. I keep adding. I'll do one real. I've lost some of my high school friends. Damn it! But I keep adding people who like my political stuff. So good stuff. Y'all have a good night, and I'll see you next Sunday evening. Bye.